Welcome back to another sew along. Today we are making my latest pattern, the Augusta skirt. It's a midi length skirt with an elasticated waist, a tiered hem, and tuck detailing throughout. So without any further ado, let's start sewing. So once you cut out all of your rectangles based on the measurements given in the pattern, you can start by sewing the side seams of both tiers at 1 centimeter seam allowance, right sides together. Then you can press the seams open and once more towards the back. Then you'll want to finish your seams either by overlocking or overcasting and press those seams again towards the back. So the next step is to hem the bottom tier. Start by tracing the lines on the right side of your fabric following the measurements given in the pattern and either for view A or for view B. Once you're done tracing your lines, check at the side seams to make sure that they align. Then you'll want to start at the side seam and fold over the 1 centimeter seam allowance toward the wrong side of your fabric, and then fold again to the second line and pin. And repeat this process while pinning all around your hem. Optionally, you can press your hem before you sew it, but I prefer to wait after to do it. So starting from one of the side seams, sew along the folded edge, which is called edge stitching, and make sure to backstitch at the beginning and at the end. Once you're done sewing your hem, give it a good press. So the next step is to sew the bottom tier tucks. On the right side of your fabric, working from the hem up, mark all the fold lines all around the tier, following the measurements given in the pattern. So I like to mark all the lines on the front side first, and then I flip my tier and mark the rest of all the lines on the back side, and make sure that your lines are aligned at the side seams. So now we're gonna press all of the fold lines. So I like to slip the skirt around my iron table to press each fold, working segment by segment and rotating the skirt around my iron table to do so. So bring the fabric from each line to the bottom of the tier inward, so wrong sides together, and press each line, working segment by segment. Pressing the lines like that will give us creases and straight lines to follow when sewing the tucks at our sewing machine. If you're using a heat erasable pen, make sure that you're not erasing the other lines that you haven't pressed yet. The folds will not stay folded as you press, but that's okay as long as you have the creases of the folds visible to refold them once you're at your sewing machine. Once you're done that first line, if you wish, you can pin at the side seams to hold it together. Bring your skirt at your sewing table and with the last line you just pressed folded, so the top one, and starting at the side seam, sew the tucks following the measurements given in the pattern. So I'm just aligning my folded edge based on the measurements for the tuck. So for example, if I'm sewing a 1 centimeter tuck like we see here, I align that folded edge to my 1 centimeter guideline on my sewing machine, and I just follow that while I'm sewing the tuck. So once you're done sewing your first tuck, you'll just kind of unfold the rest of the skirt to the next tuck and sew that tuck. And you keep doing that until you've sewn all the tucks. So always make sure that your fold is well folded underneath and no fabric is getting caught from other parts of the skirt. Once you're done, press all the tucks towards the hem. So the next step is to gather the bottom tier. So we're going to create basting stitches. I like to do 2 rows. The first one being the closest to the edge at around 7 millimeter. And I like to start by back stitching, and I don't backstitch at the end. I leave a long tail that we'll use to pull the threads to gather the fabric. So I do that first line on the front, and then I do that same line on the back, and then I create the second lines, which are the width of my presser foot. Once you're done creating your basting stitches, we're going to place the top tier right side out inside the bottom tier, which is wrong side out, and align the side seams, pin, then gather the bottom tier until its width matches the top tiers, and pin all around and sew all around the skirt at 1 centimeter seam allowance. While I'm sewing over the gathers, I like to adjust them and make sure they are evenly distributed. Once you're done, remove the basting stitches by unpicking the back stitch you made and pull on the threads. They should come loose as you pull on them. Then finish your seam your preferred way. Here I use the tapestry needle, and I actually like to thread the needle first through my line of stitching close to the edge for a couple of inches, and then I thread it and pull it through and then trim off the excess thread. Next step is to sew the top tier's tucks, just the same way we did for the bottom tier. So mark all of your folding line on your fabric on the right side, following the measurements given in the pattern. Make sure that they are well aligned at the side seams. And once you're done, fold to your first line, your skirt inside, so wrong sides together, and press that line segment by segment, rotating the skirt around your iron table, making sure not to erase the other lines. So with the top line you just pressed still folded, sew the tucks based on the view you are making, view A or view B, and following the measurements given in the pattern. For the next two folds, unfold the fabric to the crease line you made and sew based on the measurements given in the pattern. Make sure there's no fabric caught underneath and your fold is laying flat. For view B, the last tuck, so the one located just above the gathered seam of the bottom tier, is a bit tricky to sew since it's so close to it. So I suggest flipping the skirt so that you sew it with the gathers visible, so facing you. And make sure the finished tier seam inside the serge seam is out of the way when you're sewing. I like to use my left hand to flip it so that it faces downward towards the hem. Once you're done sewing all of your tucks, give them a good press towards the hem. And make sure that all of your lines, if you're using a pen, are removed. The last step is to sew the elastic casing. So on the right side of your fabric, mark the seam allowance at 1 centimeter from the raw edge, and then mark the other line at 4 centimeter from the one you just traced. And make sure the lines are aligned at the side seams. Then, starting at the side seams, fold over the seam allowance towards the wrong side and fold again to the second line and pin. And repeat this process all around, leaving a 5 centimeter gap at the center back to insert the elastic. Then sew all around the folded edge, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and at the end. And once you're done, give your waistband a good press. So if you haven't done so already, cut your elastic the length of your waist circumference or follow the chart given in the pattern. And insert the elastic inside the casing using either a big safety pin or an elastic threader tool, which is what I'm using right now. Make sure to clip the other end of the elastic to the skirt so that you don't accidentally pull it inside the casing while you're threading it through it. When arriving back at the gap, pull out some of the elastic and overlap both elastic ends by 2 centimeters and sew them together with a straight stitch on each side or by making a cross pattern. Stretch out the waistband gently so that the elastic goes back into the casing. And before moving to the next step, try the skirt on and adjust the elastic if necessary. And distribute all the gathers evenly. Then sew the gap closed, starting and finishing a couple of stitches on top of the seam. Once you're done, give it a good press. And admire the beautiful tucks you made. I hope you enjoyed making this Augusta skirt, and make sure to tag me on Instagram if you post photos of it.